In a matter of hours, Celtic stepped back into a European night that genuinely feels like a crossroads for the season. This is not just another fixture to tick off the calendar, not another game to rotate the squad and move on from. This one carries real weight because if Celtic fail to win, this could very well be the last European appearance of the campaign. Some supporters might already feel resigned to that idea. Others might even see it as a relief with domestic priorities piling up. But the truth is that this match matters far more than it might seem on the surface, and the context around it makes it impossible to ignore. Celtic Park under the lights always brings a certain expectation, a sense that something important can happen even when the season has been uneven and frustrating. The Europa League phase has not been kind, but the situation is still brutally simple. Win tonight, and Celtic move on to the playoff round. Anything else, and the door to Europe likely slams shut. That clarity adds pressure, but it also removes excuses. There is no need to look at other results, no need to calculate permutations. The task is clear, and that alone should sharpen the focus inside the stadium. The build-up to this game, though, has been far from calm. The atmosphere around the club over the last few days has been dominated by uncertainty, frustration, and a growing sense that time is slipping away in the transfer window. With the deadline now only days away, questions about recruitment refuse to go away, and yesterday's press conference did little to reassure anyone. There was a strange tone to it all, moments that felt awkward and distracting, and a sense that important issues were being danced around rather than confronted head-on. Martin O'Neill, as ever, tried to use humor and levity to soften the edges of some very uncomfortable questions. When asked about the lack of incoming players and whether that should be a cause for concern, he leaned into jokes about worrying at this stage of his life, almost deflecting the tension with a smile. For some supporters, that kind of approach can feel grating, especially when the squad looks thin and the need for reinforcements feels urgent. When fans are stressed and anxious about the direction of the season, humor can sometimes land the wrong way. That said, it is important to be fair. The lack of transfer business is not something that can be laid entirely at the manager's door. O'Neill did not plan this window months in advance, and he has been open about the fact that he did not even expect to be back at Celtic until late December. His focus only shifted to recruitment once he returned in early January, and by then the clock was already ticking. January is notoriously difficult. Clubs are reluctant to sell, prices rise quickly, and deals that look promising can collapse in minutes. What was more revealing came when O'Neill spoke about transfer targets in broader terms. He talked about having an idea of an initial list of players, a secondary list, and the danger of being pushed too far down that ladder. His message was clear enough. He would rather wait for the right quality than panic and end up with players who do not genuinely improve the squad. Deals can change suddenly, prices can shift, other clubs with greater resources can step in, and what looks achievable one moment can disappear the next. Despite all that, he insisted he remains hopeful. That hope, however, sits uneasily alongside the reality that Celtic may reach the final day of the window without having secured the reinforcements everyone knows are needed. There is a familiar pattern here, one supporters have seen before, where business is delayed until the very end and the club scrambles for short-term solutions. The fear is not just about timing, but about ambition, about whether Celtic are truly prepared to strengthen decisively or whether they will once again settle for makeshift answers. One specific comment from O'Neill did stand out when he spoke about the type of player he wants. He mentioned his love for footballers who can go past people, players with something explosive about them, That immediately points towards wide areas, towards a winger who can inject pace and unpredictability into the attack. It is an area where Celtic clearly lack depth and variety, and it feels like a position that must be addressed before the window closes. Naturally, rumours have followed, names circulate, some more realistic than others. One of the more exciting links has involved a forward enjoying a strong European campaign elsewhere, scoring goals against elite opposition and building a growing reputation. The problem with those kinds of rumours is that they often collapse under the weight of their own excitement. When fees climb into figures that Celtic have historically been reluctant to pay, belief quickly fades. Other clubs, particularly from England, can move at a financial level Celtic rarely match. More plausible are the links to players whose careers have stalled in recent seasons, footballers who once commanded big moves but have since struggled for form or stability. Celtic's recent recruitment history shows a willingness to offer those players a reset, a chance to rebuild confidence in a less pressurized environment. Sometimes that approach pays off, sometimes it does not, but it appears to be the model the club is most comfortable with at the moment. Alongside potential arrivals, there has also been movement around possible departures or at least interest from other clubs. Offers have been discussed, loans proposed, but the message from inside Celtic is consistent. Players will not be allowed to leave unless replacements are secured first. On paper, that makes sense. The squad is already stretched, and further departures without reinforcements would only weaken it more. In practice, though, it risks creating a standoff where nothing moves at all. Against that backdrop, tonight's match takes on even greater importance. European progression is not just about pride or prestige. It also impacts finances, confidence, and the perception of the club. A run, even a short one, can change the mood by time and give meaning to the second half of the season. Elimination, on the other hand, would intensify scrutiny on every decision being made off the pitch. The opponents may not arrive with a strong record in this competition, but that does not make them harmless. They have been competitive in most of their matches, rarely being beaten heavily, and they have shown they can frustrate opponents by staying in games. With nothing to lose and domestic priorities ahead, they may rotate, but they will still have players capable of causing problems if Celtic lose focus or intensity. There is also a familiar face returning to Celtic Park in the opposing goal, a player whose time in Glasgow did not go as planned. Those storylines always add a bit of spice, a bit of emotion, but ultimately they are sideshows. What matters is how Celtic handle the occasion, how they respond to pressure, and whether they can impose themselves from the first whistle. Team news adds another layer of intrigue. Suspensions and registration issues mean certain players will be absent, limiting options and forcing decisions. There is cautious optimism around a few returning from injury, players who could make a real difference once fully fit. But there is also an awareness that rushing them back would be a risk. The balance between urgency and patience is delicate, especially with crucial league fixtures also looming as kickoff approaches. The feeling is one of tension mixed with opportunity. Celtic are far from perfect. Confidence has been shaken, and questions remain unanswered. Yet, European nights have a way of cutting through the noise. For 90 minutes, everything becomes simpler. Win and the journey continues. Lose or draw, and the consequences are immediate. Under the lights, in front of a demanding crowd, this is the kind of moment that can define a season for better or for worse. And it is now up to Celtic to decide which direction it goes. as the focus narrows toward the match itself, the reality for Celtic becomes even more unforgiving when you break down what is actually required on the night. There is no safety net, no second chance built into the equation. The table does not care about context, injuries, or frustration from the stands. Victory is the only outcome that guarantees progression, and that knowledge has been hanging over the squad all week. European football has a habit of exposing uncertainty, and right now, Celtic are a side still searching for rhythm, balance, and belief. What makes this situation particularly uncomfortable is that the margin for error feels thinner than usual. Celtic have not been ruthless enough in Europe this season, often allowing games to drift when control was there to be taken. Moments of promise have too often been followed by lapses in concentration, defensive hesitation, or a lack of conviction in the final third. Those small failures accumulate, and now they have led to a scenario where everything hinges on one performance. The opponents arrive knowing they have little to gain in terms of qualification, but that does not automatically make them passive. Teams in that position can be dangerous precisely because the pressure is off. They can play with freedom, rotate players, and give opportunities to individuals eager to prove a point. Celtic, by contrast, will feel every misplaced pass, every missed chance, every anxious murmur from the crowd. Managing that psychological weight will be just as important as any tactical plan. Celtic's own form adds another layer of uncertainty. Domestically, the performances have fluctuated, and while there have been glimpses of intensity and cohesion, they have not been sustained consistently enough to inspire full confidence. The attack has looked blunt at times, predictable in its build-up, and overly reliant on moments rather than patterns. Defensively, there have been spells of solidity, but also moments where the backline looks vulnerable to direct running and quick transitions. The absence of certain players through suspension and registration rules strips away some flexibility. There are footballers who could have added energy, pace, or unpredictability, but will instead be watching from the stands. That reality forces others to step up, to shoulder responsibility whether they feel ready or not. In European football, depth matters, and Celtic are being reminded of that harshly. There is cautious optimism around players returning from injury, but the tone from the coaching staff has been measured. The last thing Celtic can afford is another setback caused by rushing someone back too soon. Long-term fitness cannot be sacrificed entirely for short-term gain, especially with the league campaign still demanding consistency week after week. Yet there is an unavoidable tension there because the need for quality on the pitch tonight is immediate and undeniable. Midfield will likely be the battleground where this game is decided. Controlled tempo and decision-making will determine whether Celtic can pin their opponents back or whether the match becomes stretched and chaotic. When Celtic are at their best in Europe, they dictate the pace, recycle possession intelligently, and force opponents to chase. When they struggle, the midfield becomes disjointed, gaps appear, and the defense is exposed far too often. Out wide, the lack of a natural, explosive option has been a recurring theme. Too many attacks have broken down because defenders are not being beaten one-on-one. Crosses are predictable, or movement lacks sharpness. That is why the manager's comments about wanting players who can go past opponents resonated so strongly. It is not just a transfer wish. It is a reflection of a tactical need that exists right now. Up front, finishing remains a concern. Chances have been created in European matches, but not taken with the clinical edge required at this level. That failure has turned manageable situations into desperate ones. Confidence for strikers is fragile, and one early goal could change the entire mood inside the stadium. Conversely, prolonged frustration could feed anxiety both on the pitch and in the stands. The crowd at Celtic Park will play its part. As it always does, European nights bring a different energy, a sense of history and expectation that domestic fixtures cannot replicate. The noise can lift players, push them beyond fatigue, and intimidate opponents, but it can also turn restless if the performance lacks urgency or clarity. How the team responds to that emotional current will be crucial. Beyond the 90 minutes, the wider implications loom large. Progressing in Europe would provide a much-needed boost at a time when questions about recruitment, planning, and ambition dominate the conversation. It would buy goodwill, create breathing space, and allow the manager to work without the constant shadow of elimination hanging over him. It would also reinforce the idea that, despite flaws, this Celtic side can still compete on the continental stage. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. Whispers around Parkhead grew louder after Chris Sutton let fly with a remark that's already being passed round like gospel in the pubs and phone-ins. The former Celtic striker has been telling pals that if things didn't go the way supporters hope, the finger should be pointed no further than the boardroom. In Sutton's telling, the manager, simply referred to as Martin, has been left shortchanged, asked to work miracles without the backing that a club of Celtic size and ambition should be offering. It's only a rumor just now, but it's one that's taken hold. The idea doing the rounds is that Martin's plans were bold, his shopping list clear, yet the purse strings stayed tight. Sutton is said to believe that expectations were set sky high while the resources stayed firmly grounded. In the cut and thrust of the Scottish game, that's a recipe for trouble, and Sutton reckons the supporters deserve to ken the full picture. There's a sense among some close to the club that this has been brewing for a while. Quiet frustration masked by brave words in press conferences and a feeling that Celtic are trying to punch above their financial weight without admitting it. Sutton's comments, though unofficial, have stirred that pot. Folk are asking whether the hierarchy gambled on goodwill and history instead of proper investment, and whether Martin has been left to carry the can. Of course, others will say it's easy to talk after the fact, and that budgets arena endless, even in Glasgow's East End. Still, the speculation refuses to die. If Sutton's view is right, then any disappointment won't be down to tactics or effort on the pitch, but to decisions made in suits and ties. For now, it's all talk, but in Scottish football, talk has a habit of becoming truth sooner than anyone expects. Hello, fan. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.